Hello and welcome to the Secret Spoonie Podcast with Claire and Liese. This is our first episode. We streamed it live on Twitch on Liese's Twitch channel, which will be linked in the description below. If you could just bear with us, we're having a few teething problems with the technology and just doing podcasts in general. So I think this will be a bit of a learning curve and I hope you enjoy it.
The Secret Spoonie.
Hi. Basically, the way that we're doing this is for the first probably sort of 30-40 minutes or so, we won't really be communicating with you in the chat very much because we'll be sort of talking to each other and trying to do it like a podcast. But as soon as we finish, we will let you know and we'll head back into the chat. Do you want to start record? Do you want me to sort of start this sort of countdown? Do you do the Spoonie thing or like introductions or? Claire's going to explain, because for those of you who are in the chat who don't know what a Spoonie is and are looking at the title being like, what on earth is a Spoonie? I think Claire's probably going to explain it much better than I would. So.
Okay, yeah, so a Spoonie comes from this idea of spoons theory, which was, I don't know remotely who made it.
I can't remember what her name is.
No, it's someone's made it. Anyway, the idea is it's to try and get across how a lot of chronic and invisible illnesses work and how they affect your life. So people who, for example, have CFS-ME like we do, people who have things like fibromyalgia, and then you get on to the more horrendous degenerative illnesses like MS, etc. You can be seen to do a couple of daily things and you look absolutely fine. You say, well, you can do that. Why can't you do anything else? So the idea is, what if you were given a limited number of spoons at the beginning of the day? It doesn't have to be spoons, but someone came up with spoons. So you've got these spoons and they're like tokens. And say you've got 10. And every single thing you do that day will cost you some spoons. So when you're first unwell, you'll get up and you'll get dressed and have breakfast, and that's a spoon gone. And then you'll go to work, and that's 4 spoons gone. And you're like, oh, I've got no more spoons. I can't do anything.
Yeah.
So
like I've not even hit lunchtime, and I only have the same amount of energy as I had to get up.
And then you do your work, and you're in negative spoons. You can't do anything. So it's about rationing, so you know roughly how many spoons each activity will cost you. So you could think, well, I can either have a shower that will be like a spoon, or I could save that spoon and use that to prepare the veg for dinner. You know, it's all these little things. So it's sort of explaining we've got limited amounts of energy, and it's less than most people. Yeah. And people do not realize how much energy everything takes. So that's the basic.
Even just doing this, or just talking, is exhausting, isn't it? It's like for every hour, you're like, well, that's like a spoon and a half, easy. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I don't know about you, I think it's the same for you, but just sitting in a room with people talking, I find exhausting, and to the point where I'll physically get exhausted, like a sore throat. You know, my glands will be up.
There's a reason I'm wearing a choker. to hide my swollen Arnie neck.
Well, this is it. I think people don't realise that even just listening to people is just awful, and it's a completely different level of tiredness than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk all about how it affects us neurologically, the brain fog, and how tiring it is as well to kind of to try to listen to people, because you're having to work maybe like 4 times as hard as a normal person to try and process information, and so it's so much more exhausting than it is for sort of any most other people, like able-bodied people. The thing that we're focusing on is chronic and invisible illnesses, and I'll just, I mean, when we say chronic, what we mean is illnesses that they don't really assume that they're going to get better. They are illnesses that last for at least 3 months. I think that's the sort of kind of the point where they start calling things chronic, I think. And it generally means that the symptoms that you have are going to develop and progress over time and possibly change. And it's not something that you can just like get over, because people sort of are often like, well, a month or so's rest and I'm sure you'll be feeling 100%, and you're like, I haven't been 100% for a long time.
Yeah.
So and then when we say invisible, we're talking about the illnesses that I don't know about a lot of people, but certainly when I grew up, if you said the word disabled, it had to be something that you could see. Like you have to,
like someone in a wheelchair.
You have to be in a wheelchair. You have to have a walking stick. You had to be like, you had to actually like physically to people look sick, look disabled. And if somebody looks at you and says, but you don't look sick, firstly, it's because we've had 3 days to prep for it or whatever, so you're never going to see us when we do look sick. But the invisible illnesses, there are so many of them. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. The one that Claire and I have is ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's certainly in the UK, called CFS, called chronic fatigue syndrome. The reason a lot of us use the term ME is because it actually gives it some kind of, I don't know, weight, I guess.
Legitimacy.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, you're just a bit tired. But there's like fibromyalgia, arthritis is invisible. A lot of mental health conditions are invisible. These are the things that we want to sort of tackle and talk about in this podcast, which is going to be sort of an extended thing that we're going to do. So hopefully you will enjoy it. I mean, the first thing that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to sort of click the countdown timer so we don't just like, because it's so good to talk to somebody who actually knows what it's like. And because it's one of the things that you feel so isolated. So actually being able to talk to somebody means so much. We're going to have to like keep it to 40 minutes. Otherwise we'll just be like,
exactly.
Yeah, go. We're going to talk about the start for us. So what our lives were like before this, because we weren't always like this. We weren't born like this. This is something that has happened to us. And it's interesting to sort of to talk to people and sort of find out what everyone's triggers are, because actually there are a lot of similarities sort of across the board in so many of the different sort of chronic illnesses that we talk about. So I'm going to click the countdown timer. A minute. Go. Yes, there we go. The countdown timer has started. So.
Yeah, I see.
Yay! Okay, I'm going to move my cushion out of the way because I'm trying to get comfy. This is one of the wonderful things about chronic illnesses. So, yeah, I guess the first thing is to sort of start about our lives before this. Like, what was life like before you got sick? So what yeah.
I was always very active. Hold on, sitting up. I was always very active. I used to love going to the gym. I just went out all the time. I had a very active job, so I worked just before I got sick. I worked as a police officer in London, which is obviously incredibly active. Mm-hmm. And then prior to that, I worked in retail management, but I worked in Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's local, and it was like hard manual labor. And like before that, when I was at uni, I'd be at uni and I had 2 jobs. You know, I was doing a law degree. I worked at Sainsbury's and TK Maxx. I was just go, go, go all the time. I'd go out on a Friday night. Actually, no, be even different to that. I'd start work at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning at TK Maxx, and I'd work till 10. I'd have an hour, and I'd start like, I think 11 till 7 or something at Sainsbury's. And then I'd go out until like 5 or 6, and then I'd have 4 hours sleep, and I'd be in work at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning at Sainsbury's. So that was just me. I'd just go. And then when I was a police officer, lots of thinking, lots of sort of mental focus goes on in that, because you're constantly having to sort of assess things, a lot of paperwork, and physically active. You're running around, you've got heavy equipment belts. There's no two ways about it. I was a completely different person.
That's it, isn't it? It's sort of something that somebody said to me when I first got sick, was that you go through the process of grieving.
Yeah. And
that was one of the things that I was most shocked about, because I was very similar. I was always really active. I used to go bouldering, so we used to go to France quite a bit, and I used to go to the climbing wall. I used to run. Zombies Run was just like one of my favourite podcasts, and I used to like run away from zombies. It was great. So I was really, physically fit, physically active. Used to do a lot of like Zumba. You probably like exercised in some way or another, like 3-4 times a week, easy. And then and I was a teacher, and anyone who has like seen anyone who works in education knows that it's like 70-hour weeks, and you do not stop, because you never stop thinking about like the kids and stuff, and so you're constantly like mentally, and you're marking work, and you're on your feet all day, walking around the classroom all day long, and then you're sort of working and you're prepping and you're marking papers. You catch as much sleep as you can get, then you're up in the car, drive to work, first meeting at 7:30 in the morning, bam bam bam, all day, every day. You work your weekends because you have to. And so it was just, but that was something I loved and really enjoyed, and it was really strange to kind of go, that's one of the things that we'll talk. It's really strange to sort of go from that, isn't it? That kind of like that sort of heavy work and sort of social life. I used to be able to get a message from my friends I used to have before all of this, who used to, it would be like, do you want to come to the pub just for like a couple of pints after work or whatever? And be like, sure, yeah. And I'd go nip for a couple of pints in the pub, and that was normal. That was fine, because if you're not a spoonie and you have energy, and after you've slept your energy refreshes completely, like your unlimited energy. Like, people go to work, and certainly like after Christmas, like my Twitter account has been full of people sort of being like how tired they are, and about them's like, oh, I'm nearly falling asleep at my desk. If you're a spoonie, you would fall asleep at your desk, because once that hits, you're done. Yeah. You
are. Absolutely.
So sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I did mourn those days of really silly things, like I don't know if anyone watching has spent much time in London, but at Covent Garden you've either got the lift or you've got the stairs, and the stairs are ridiculous, something like 250 steps. It's the equivalent of walking up insane, like 16 stories. And I used to take the stairs, and I used to run up the escalators, and then suddenly not being able to do that was just awful. I mourned it. I remember just being utterly miserable because I could no longer run.
No. And you're angry as well. You're really angry. I went through the anger. I've kind of come out of the anger phase. I've hit acceptance, which is just like so sad.
No, same here though.
So what happened with you then? I mean, so how did you start? How did your CFS ME start? Like, what happened to you?
So for me, it was kind of February 2016. I was getting more and more tired. Like, I was just going to bed earlier. And whereas I used to go out, like, even when I was a police officer, I was going out every night of the week. Like, you do 6 days on, 4 days off. And other than like night shifts and late shifts, I was, going out constantly. Monday doesn't matter, still going. There's still always someone that will go to the pub with you.
Especially somewhere like London, it's like it never sleeps. Yeah. It's like constant, like go.
24/7.
Yeah.
24/7.
Because I worked in Manchester, so I kind of understand it's another city for those of you who are not UK based. Anyway, sorry, keep on butting in.
No, it's okay. I was getting more and more tired, and then the next thing I noticed was that when I was walking upstairs, my thighs were hurting, but it was like they physically didn't have the strength, but I knew they did because I ran upstairs. So it was this really odd feeling of like my body not doing what I was telling it to. And now for me, I do have something slightly different because other than Liese, I also have a problem with my spinal cord called syringohydromyelin, which I won't go into on this episode. I'll go into bore you all on another episode.
You see, I'm fascinated to hear about it, so that's good. We'll definitely do that another episode.
Yeah. So I do remember a lot of my body aches and strange nerve problems did start all around the same time, but unfortunately at this same time, so it was February, and then we're getting into March 2016. I went to Edinburgh. I went on a night out, I was drinking, and they have lots of, like London, they have lots of like basement properties that you have a gate, like really long, like stone stairways down into the basement properties on the outside. And I leant back on what I thought was a fence. It was a gate, and I fell backwards down the stone stairs, hit my head on that back, and I was just stupid, and I didn't go to hospital. I just carried on drinking, and the next day I remember walking around Edinburgh, and I was so unwell. I was aching all over, and I was like violently sick all day, and I think it was part hangover, of course.
Yeah, but
the amount I was sick was very unusual for me, and how I felt, I do think I probably had a mild concussion. And then, later on, I found out that I had this spinal cord thing. So all of these things kind of did start at the same time, but the syringohydromyelin doesn't account for any of the tiredness. So having all these symptoms, I started to get like the body aches, and then in April I went to Rome, and I walked around all day, and just the exhaustion I'd never felt before. So I eventually kept going to my doctor and saying, something's wrong. They said I had a slight vitamin D deficiency. So she put me on a really high dose of vitamin D to get back up. That kind of helped, and then kind of fell off again. And she eventually referred me to a rheumatologist because I was getting like the tingling and stuff. Mm-hmm. He did lots of tests, like physical exam, and then he sent me off for an MRI to rule out MS. That was when they discovered that I had the spinal, so I had pockets of fluid in my spinal cord. You're not meant to have those.
No, you're not.
I was also referred to a neurologist for that, who I still see, but they basically both, between the two of them, confirmed that they thought the rest of my symptoms chronic fatigue syndrome. And it kind of just went from there. And then they, put me on pregabalin for the nerve pain I was getting. And I eventually, by the end of the year, I just had to stop working. Yeah. I became brain fog. I forgot, you forget your words. It's not aphasia. I keep forgetting what the actual term for it is.
I want to call it like dysphagia or something.
I think it might be dysphagia, because there's aphasia where you
brain fog. It's really
Yeah.
hard. It's like, yeah, it's something, but I can't remember.
But yeah, there's a thing where it is kind of linked to CFS and pregabalin, sadly, where you just literally, like, the word is in your head somewhere, you just can't get to it. Sometimes, and it feels like thinking through treacle, I think, sometimes.
Yeah,
it's really hard for me to
really
form
hard.
coherent thoughts unless I'm, like, for me, highly caffeinated, which makes everything worse in the long run. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't develop
caffeine is one thing that I can't have because it makes me really unwell these days.
Yeah,
I
it's
miss
not good
it.
for me, to be honest.
I miss coffee.
Yeah, it's not good. It messes me up so much. And it probably wouldn't do if I didn't have the CFS. But yeah, it just kind of slowly your life slowly crumbles. For me, it was kind of this slow descent of, like, it just got worse and worse and worse. And then once I sort of fell off that cliff of, I thought, well, maybe, I'll have a month off work, see how it goes. And I never went back.
Yeah, I remember meeting you probably around that time, actually, because I remember us talking about that.
Yeah, I hadn't been off work long, had I?
No, I don't think you had, because I think that
probably
was
nearly 2 years that we've known
yeah,
each other.
God.
So what about you? How did you first notice it?
Well, I got glandular fever when I was in my late teens, and that seemed to trash my immune system slightly.
That's really... See, I didn't know this, but when I was a kid, I constantly had, like, tonsilly, glandular fever type stuff, although I've always tested negative glandular fever, but my immune system was kind of knocked after that. So that's another thing we have in common.
There we go. So
I'm sure it's a thing.
I do think it's all linked, because they do think, there's all sorts of it, like, kind of thoughts about what causes it, because there's no research.
And we'll have to do it. I think we'll have to do a whole podcast episode on the research, because it's really, really interesting.
It's really interesting, but yeah, we might need like an hour for that. But yeah. I had got chronic sinusitis. And I had sinusitis for about 3 months, and I'd had antibiotics, and nothing helped. Nothing helped at all. I was so unwell, but I was a teacher, and so you have to keep going, and so I kind of worked myself into the ground, and then I took a trip to the battlefields, the World War I battlefields, so Belgium, France, Germany, and it was awful. The kids really enjoyed it. I didn't sleep for 3 days, I don't think, and it was so stressful. It was so stressful because the kids were, it was. I won't go into it. It was a nightmare. And I got back on the coach that we'd travelled from France through the Channel and up because I live in the north of the country. Dropped off. And I remember trying to get off the coach, and I remember my legs wouldn't work, and I felt very detached from my own body, almost like I was looking in and just being like, come on work, like trying to convince my legs to move, but very disassociated. I don't even know if that's the word. I was separated out, and I managed to get into Jim, get into the car, and he drove me home, and he was trying to talk to me, and I just remember the buzzing in my ears and just this feeling of it all being very, very unreal. Got back, and I just couldn't wake up. It was like Jim could just about raise me, but I just couldn't stop. I couldn't stop sleeping. I was so exhausted, and it was like the worst. If you've ever had proper flu, like, when people say, I've got flu, and you're like, you haven't got flu. If you had flu, you would know. It was like having the worst flu. I was just like I felt my temperature was all off. I was like, am I cold? Am I hot? Everything was like tingling, like weird, like, kind of like everything ached, but everything tingled at the same time. And it was kind of like, I felt like I was constantly rocking like this. Felt like I was constantly doing this, but I wasn't. But I was lying in bed feeling like I was constantly moving.
And these are all symptoms I get, by the way, as well. So I completely understand.
And you know what? When you and this is one of the things that I will go into is this is going to be I'm hoping that this is going to be helpful for people who are just starting on this sort of on their sad journey into chronic fatigue, into ME, because this is not stuff that you're ever really told.
No,
you don't know about any of this, and you kind of think you're going mad. You do. You kind of, you don't know what's going on, and if you're used to being active, you can't. Your brain is constantly telling you that, well, it can't be real, but your body is telling you that it is. So I eventually managed to get to the doctor. And that was hard because at that point I could barely get down the stairs. The whole Spoonie thing's really hits home for me, because I remember it happened. It's the kind of things happened a few times, but I remember one moment, and I will say it very honestly, that I was lying in bed and I had the tingling and I had the aches, and I thought to myself, I don't know if I have the energy to get up and go to the loo. And I was like, I know that I have to eat later, but if I, it's like, do I go to the toilet or do I eat? And so I managed to get to the doctor and sort of explained all of these things and got fobbed off, because I live in the north of England. I live in quite a rural area, and I went to my GP. I explained everything, but because on my records it said that I had depression, and also because everyone knows everyone. He knew I was a teacher. He said that it was probably my personality. I had a type A he said you have what's called type A personality, and you've probably basically done this to yourself. So he upped my antidepressants, which basically completely just made my brain fog so much worse, obviously, and said and gave me 2 weeks off to just like get over it. And so 2 weeks later, I phoned him up because I physically couldn't get to the doctor at that point, and I sort of said, I tried to explain about it not getting better, and I was so upset with how my body felt. I was crying all the time, which probably like linked very much into him thinking it was all in my head. It's like, but it's not, because I'm a really physically active person. I don't want to be this person. I don't want to be the person who can't move. I love my job. I love my kids. I miss them desperately. I don't want to be ill. I'm not
That was exactly what I said to my rheumatologist. I cried when he said he thought I had CFS, and I said I'd heard that it was something that people had because it was like burnout, and it actually that they secretly just wanted to rest and stuff, and I was like, I don't want to be ill. I've got everything going for me.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that it's a real shame as well, because it's and again it's something we'll talk about in future episodes, but it's the sort of the connotations that go with chronic fatigue syndrome. The idea that it is yuppie flu, that it is, I think it was Ricky Gervais who made a joke during one of his stand-ups about chronic fatigue syndrome, isn't that the I don't want to bother going to work syndrome? And everyone laughed, and that is the problem. That people...
But there's a joke in that in Benidorm, and I love that series. It's very, very funny, very astute. But there's there's a woman who makes a comment in one of the early seasons saying something along the lines of ME, is that the one where you just can't be bothered to go to work?
Yeah.
Or you don't feel like going to work. And I remember being like,
I don't want to have that. You can't.
I want to go to work.
Yeah, I don't. You can't tell me I have that because because that's not me. It isn't me, and it has taken a long time to kind of come to that sort of the acceptance of it. But basically, I tried to go back, and I managed. I don't think it was even a full day before I was like because you have to stand up in the classroom, before I was like basically like crumpled over the desk, and it was a case of like I have to somehow drive 45 minutes home, and I can't even like make my legs move. This is actually this is not only do I feel awful, but this is dangerous, and I can't think, and I can barely see, and I feel like I feel like I've got the worst hangover in the world. And I feel drunk, and so I ended up in the same way. I ended up being, it was like signed off for a week, signed off for 2 weeks, signed off for 3 weeks, signed off for a month, and then it ended up getting to the point where I was having to constantly meet up with people from the person from my work who was like assessing me, and constantly feeling judged, like, why can't you get better? And it's like, well, I don't really have control over it. Like, I don't really have control over what my body decides to do at this point. I would like to be, but not so much. And yeah, it hit the point where I ended up sending a message into my teaching job, and just saying, I can't do it. I'm going to have to stop, and I'm not going to be able to come back, and it's not fair to keep you hanging, because I love my job. I loved everything about, and I love the kids, and they needed, better than that. And so I gave it up. But one of the big triggers for me, and I think this is something that I've spoken to other people about, that my MECFS was bad, but it got so much worse after I had a traumatic injury. So I was in an incident where the tendon to my foot was severed, and I was in hospital for a week, and I had to have quite serious surgery, and I couldn't walk for months. And the trauma of that, everyone who knows me has said that I have never got well since. And whatever, my body having to fight that hard against infection and various other things, it's almost like it's never stopped, and it's just basically trying, it's like constantly like an internal battle. So I've never sort of improved since then. And I mean, so I mean, my diagnosis was pretty much a throwaway, like, oh well, if it's not this and it's not this and nothing's showing up on your blood tests, it must be this. Okay, so what can you do about it? Oh, nothing. You can have some cognitive behavioural therapy. And it's like, well, yeah, but I can't like psych myself into like feeling better. Like, I'm pretty fucking positive, thank you very much. And I've had cognitive behavioural therapy until it comes out, my arse. But it has, I know how to like hit my trigger, like stop my triggers when they happen and stop the spiral of self-destruction. I know all of that stuff, but it doesn't help. That doesn't change the fact that what we have is an actual physical illness. And that is something that certainly my route to diagnosis has completely ignored. And I haven't been back to the doctor about it for, I don't even know. I just gave up.
Yeah,
I've just given up on medicine, basically.
No, I can imagine. And one thing that struck for me was when when you and I met, and I'd sort of spoken about the fact that because I at the time lived in Greenwich, which is a wealthy inner borough in London. I'm not wealthy, but
it's a nice,
lots of rich people.
Yeah,
it's a very nice place. Lots of rich people live there. Ergo, they pay lots of council tax and lots of money in the area. So we've got really good doctors. And my local hospitals are like Guy's and St Thomas's, which are world renowned, or at least countrywide renowned. They're very, very good hospitals.
Yeah.
And so I was just very lucky in the fact that my doctors referred me to a rheumatologist. They referred me, and then the rheumatologist referred me to a neurologist. I had a full brain and spine MRI. I had blood tests, I had nerve function tests, all sorts of things. I had a sleep study done where you are like wired up with electrodes, and they record you while you sleep. I had all of that, all on the NHS. It was free. It was just because of the chance where I lived. And then when I spoke to Lisa and I said, "Oh, did you go to the rheumatologist or anything?" And she was like, "No."
It's like, what, they do that? Is that they actually send you places and help you rather than what I was told? And I don't, but you had your sleep study and stuff. As far as sleep went, I was told to go to bed at a set time and stay in bed until like 7 a.m. and then get up, regardless of how much sleep I'd had, and that would eventually fix me. That was the kind of like medical help I got. And told to go on a bike ride as well. It's like, yeah, that's gonna make me feel great, thanks.
Not helpful.
It's very different all over the country and all over the world as well. Sorry,
I was just gonna say, to be fair, I didn't get much in the way of like advice.
No, you didn't.
The best. My neurologist was the best, and they're the people that really get it, and they're very much like, just pace yourself, do what you can, don't do what you can't, and kind of go from there. They gave me some hydrotherapy to kind of help start like moving my aching muscles and stuff, and see if that helped with the pain, which it didn't really, but it was worth a go.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've taken myself to like the disabled swims at the local kind of quite warm swimming pool to do my own hydrotherapy, because it's not the kind of thing that has been suggested by anyone. But obviously, talking to you and talking to other people, there are things that you kind of think, oh, it's worth a go. But the only problem is, I mean, I go swimming, and for 2 days afterwards, I can't do anything.
Yeah, and this is why with the hydrotherapy, you just do like you're just stretching in a pool, basically.
Yeah.
Sorry, as I interrupted you.
No.
You're right. All over the world, it's completely different. I'm on Reddit quite a lot, and I look on the CFS subreddit, and people in different parts of the world have wildly different experiences. And there's wildly different amounts of information. Although having said that, from what I've seen in the last year or two, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, they're starting to do a lot more studies on the fact that ME/CFS is a proper illness. Yeah. I mean, it may well be that part of the trigger is, emotional trauma, whatever, but it doesn't change the fact that there are studies that show that it is still physically affecting your body. It's not just psychosomatic.
Well,
and I think that's what's really important.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that when I was doing my teacher training, you learn about how emotional, and you've done about it as well, how emotional trauma actually changes your brain chemistry, like the production of the stress hormones. Cortisol kills your. I mean, if you look at the sort of brain scans of a child who has maybe grown up in like a Romanian orphanage and has constantly been stressed and upset, and a child who hasn't, the difference is just unbelievable. And yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there was at least part of it, but it's still a physiological illness. So I mean,
Exactly.
what?
Just say we're on 9 minutes left.
Yeah, I was going to say, shall we think about like short and like how it's affected us in like the short and the long term?
Yeah. Okay. Shall I go first again?
I mean, I'll go first.
You want to go?
I mean,
yeah, you go. You go.
Yeah, I'll go first. Why
Your
not?
turn.
Yeah.
Your turn.
In the short term, I was in complete denial about it, and it meant that I probably made myself a lot worse in the short term. As it's progressed to long term, I've got better at sort of staggering it. I've got better at kind of staging my spoons and going, okay, well, I'm going to need 6 spoons on Saturday, so I can't do, or I'm going to, for streaming, people again will see me and be like, I'm another streamer. What they don't understand is that I've had to sleep all day to be able to save my spoons to do it. But in the short term, I did not understand that was how it worked, because I read as much as I could, and there was very little out there. Like 3 years ago, there was very little information about it. It's much better now. But I was constantly pushing, and then like as soon as I felt even slightly better, I assumed I was getting better. I assumed that I was going to keep progressing up. And what constantly happened was, obviously, like, I was here, and then I felt, slightly better because I'd rested. So I did loads of stuff because that's the kind of person that I am. And at that point I went, woo! And it was like, ugh. So then I'd have to rest a couple of days, and maybe I'd do this, and then I'd be like, hey, I'm getting better! Woo! And I just basically, it was like a roller coaster. It was all, and I didn't, and it was only people looking in who understood that was what they could see was happening to me. I personally found I just couldn't, I couldn't equate being sick with me. I think that was one of my sort of big sort of short-term kind of issues. The fact that I suddenly had to cancel seeing friends. I just didn't have the energy to see people and to do things. And the more that happened, the more anxious I got about it. And going again from like being a social person to suddenly having to be like, well, I can't do anything if you just like ask me out. And also I'm suddenly feeling really ill, so I can't do it. And that was a massive change, which really triggered the depression like that, because it went massively up, because I wasn't myself anymore. I felt like the person who I was had gone. And you'll be the same, but having like the post exercise sort of fatigue and stuff, you again, it's for the short term stuff, it was all just such a massive change in who I was as a person. As far as long term goes, that hasn't actually changed. If I do too much, I crash. I know that you're the same. I feel like I've lost most of my real life friends. Luckily, I've made a lot of friends online, which is fantastic, and made friends on Twitter. Love you. My lack of income is obviously a major issue, but I'm getting better long term after 3 years to sort of realize that there's peaks and troughs and crashes, and I have to be more sensible. So in some ways, the sort of it's not any better, but I'm better at being ill. Does that make sense? So what about you?
Same for me, really. But when I first got sick, I was massively in denial. I kept pushing myself when I could, because it's in your nature. The second you feel okay, you think, wow, I must, I've got to get all this stuff done just in case, or like, oh yay, I'm fine now, and then I would crash again. And I used to find like I'd have energy in the morning, and then I could sort of do things, and then by the end of the day I was getting tired, and then it just got to a point where I just couldn't. And I actually found that the beginning was worse for me. My CFS was horrendous right at the very start, in the fact that I remember at times where I would just like crawl to the bathroom,
and you do.
You can't stand up in the shower, like physically could not stand up.
All of my shower bottles are at the are quite often at the bottom because I sit.
Yeah.
I have to sit. Yeah, and
I kind of got to that stage of like, fuck, I'm kind of gonna have to deal with this, and I was very angry, and I was really stressed because I lived in London and people kept wanting to see me, and I was off work, and I'd sort of see people, and then it would make me more sick, and then eventually I moved up north for other reasons I'll go into at a later date, as well as the CFS, and like gave up work, and now I see people, but it's very much sort of on my terms. I do miss seeing my friends, but it's sort of like, you know, every couple of months I'll go down for a weekend, and I can kind of cope with it for a weekend.
Yeah, because you've got time to recuperate afterwards. You know that you can sort of pull. You know that you can pull away. You're not. You're far enough out of it, I guess, maybe, to be able to kind of say, okay, well, I can do this, but at least now I can then go 100 and so, like however many miles away and be like, okay, now I can sleep for like 3 days.
And also, once you've had it for a while, I think you get to a point where everyone knows, and you've learned to manage it. I'm better at managing it. You know, I can now go for the occasional walk along the seafront. I'll still end up sometimes like sleeping all of the next day, but that's okay. I'm aware of that now. And if I know I'm doing something tomorrow or in 2 days, like Lisa says, like you say, I'll save my spoons. Yeah. I'll say, well, I can't really do that because that's gonna exhaust me, and then I'm not gonna have any energy. And because it's what's the term? I always forget the word. Incremental.
Yes.
No, that might not be the word. It goes up.
Yeah,
so
it just goes up by little stages.
Oh, I know the word. It's not incremental, but it's something like that.
It's all right. I make up words all the time. That's one of my wonderful things.
So it gets worse the more you do it. So if I was to do something one day, I'd be tired the next day. But if I'm then tired and I do something the next day, then on the third day, I'm even more exhausted. But if I push myself on the third day, by the fourth day, I'm so unwell. Yeah. That's like a week in bed. But if I kind of don't do things, when I start to get tired, you learn your warning signs, and that's when you rest.
Yeah.
Rather than pushing through, because you're kind of your brain is like, no, let's just push through. But you have to, and that's. But in the long term, it's not changed anything massively in the way that I am as a person. Apart from the fact that I don't work and I kind of have to re-examine what I want to do. But you take time off. You're unwell, and then you start thinking, well, what else can I do? What can I do from home? What can I do from my bed?
Because of the kind of people that we are, and I think that is, I know that we're out of sort of the podcast time, as it were, but that's, I think, partly because of the kind of people that we are, and the kind of people that you are as in like the core center of yourself. That having an illness, having a chronic illness, having a disability on top, it doesn't change who you are. You're still you. And so I know Claire and I are both the kind of people who work damn hard, and we like to work hard, and we like to sort of push ourselves, and that's why you find extra things to sort of fill your time, but also that you can manage, because otherwise it would just be most miserable existence.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Definitely. I mean, we can go into that on another episode of like
definitely.
what have we learned to do? What do we do now for fun?
Yes. What do we? How do we manage our illness in a positive way? I know that there's a bunch of people here who sort of sympathise with having the sort of invisible illnesses. It's not the end. It doesn't sort of change who you are. You just have to accept it as best as you can. And if trust your body, I think is my big one. Doctors only know so much and they can only tell you so much. If your body is screaming at you and telling you that something is wrong, listen to it. And talk to people who actually know what they're talking about, because the things that you will read about illnesses like ours, they'll give you the kind of like the maybe 2 or 3 standard things, but there are a lot, but suddenly you might be like, oh, that might be this as well. Trust your body. Always trust yourself and trust your body.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, one thing I get inspiration from is my mum has early onset dementia. She has Alzheimer's. She always talks about it's not about suffering from something, it's living with it. So learn to live with it and learn to live well with it, and that's the thing that I focus on nowadays. And I know that's what she focuses on, so we kind of do it together. How can I kind of still have a life even though I ostensibly would seem not to have one? And it's just learning to live well with something rather than just let it define you.
I think it's people's definitions, isn't it? It's people kind of thinking that it's only their way is the right way. You can only be content if you work or if you do this and if you can do that. But contentment can be found in all sorts of ways based around your means and your constraints.
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a good question. Do you want to tackle that one to start?
Yeah. So the question is from you start. How do you feel about the way people who don't understand you view you now that you have more awareness of your illness? I've stopped caring, to be honest. I was really upset. Like in the beginning, I'd be like, no, it's real. It's not just like a somatic. Well, and now I'm just like, screw you. If you want to think that, that's fine. I talk to them about the ways it affects me, and if they don't want to believe me, then I just don't have space for that negativity in my life anymore. I know it sounds like it's really sort of Tumblrism cliche to say, but I think it's true. You just have to kind of ignore all that, because people are gonna think what they think no matter what. And you just have to live your life and do it without them in it if they're going to be like that.
I am in complete agreement with that. I was really aware to start with about how people would judge me and people would see me, because of the idea that if you can't see it, it doesn't exist, but you don't look sick and all of that kind of shit. And now, after 3 years, I have decided that the people who know me well enough to know that I'm not a liar. They know me well enough to know that I'm not the kind of person who would pretend to be sick. Therefore, the only people that matter are the people who know me well enough to know that I'm sick. If other people sort of make snap judgments and judge me harshly and don't believe me, then I don't care, because I've got precious little energy as it is. I'd rather give it to the people who actually matter.
I was going to say something, but I can't remember what it was.
This is what happens as well, though. I know that Claire's been resting all day. I've been resting all day on and off sleep. Those of you who have certainly seen me at the end of a stream when my brain fog gets really bad when I can't think of words, I slur, my eyes will start like weeping, and and I've had it plenty of times when people kind of go, yeah, you really need to stop now. And it's like, yeah,
you're no longer making any sense.
Yeah, you're making words up now. You're just mumbling.
Oh, so, there's a good thing here. The Supreme one has said, it's not a question per se, but does it feel like your body is giving up on you? I think that's a good one before we sort of round this off.
It feels like my body has betrayed me.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I don't think it doesn't feel like my body is kind of like crumbling, but it feels like it's not acting in the way that it is supposed to and the way that it should, and it doesn't do what I'm telling it to do. So like I have problems with hand-eye coordination. It's why I can't drive anymore. And so it feels very much like, it's like, why are you not doing what I'm telling you to do? You drop as well. And one of the things that you're tested for when for disability and stuff in the UK is like you tested for like your strength of grip and things like that. For me, it's neurological, and for most of us, I think that it's not that you can't, it's that your brain tries to tell, it just doesn't, nothing's connecting. So it's like you forget that you're supposed to be gripping something or holding something. So yeah, your body's just kind of basically like doing its own thing, and you're there like tapping your fingers going, hi, like I'm kind of want to live a life here, and it's like off doing its own thing.
I just kind of feel like I don't really have control over it. Does there's so many issues with my body, I've just kind of given up getting upset about it at this point. I just kind of figure there's nothing I can do. I just have to make the best of it. But it's let me down a bit. If I could go back to when they were handing out bodies, I think I'd like want a refund.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
You'd want to go to the body shop and be like, why are you not working anymore? I don't want to.
I feel like we're both struggling with words now.
Yeah, I don't want to cut it really short, but there's only so much thinking you can do. Like, and this is actual thinking and talking. I mean, this will have used, I know we've only been live for like an hour, but this has used a good like 4 spoons.
Oh yeah. I don't know about you, but I often find when I'm on the phone to my mum, I'll just like, we'll be chatting away and I'm like, I'm going now, bye. All of a sudden my energy is just gone. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well the conversation's over, bye.
I'm out. Well, I mean, I'm sorry if we will have missed shitloads of questions. We will be sorting out a Discord like for this podcast at some point. Our Twitter accounts are on the screen. We're very friendly. Talk to us, and that way you'll get alerts when we next go live as well, because we're going to try and do this as regularly as possible, basically.
We will give you like days in advance. We're not just going to suddenly be like, oh, we're going live tonight.
Because we can't do that.
No, don't worry. We will give you plenty of notice. And I'm sure as time goes on, we'll get a bit more better. A bit more gooder at this. And I'll probably at some point set up like a dedicated Twitter account. And I think for things like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and stuff, they kind of want you to have a few episodes before you start uploading them if you're kind of a smaller, like if you're not doing it through an agency or whatever, management thing. So once we've got in the flow and we've got a few episodes, we can start uploading them to things.
And we've got a YouTube as well. So are we going to try and make it we're going to try and make it a regular thing, but we will talk about this and we will come back to you. Definitely won't be one next week because because I've got to save my spoons anyway, because next Saturday we're playing Gloomhaven at a friend's because board games are life. We love our board games. So there won't be anything next week, but we'll we'll sort it out. We will.
I mean,
It's time to finish because I can't word anymore.
No, I can't do words.
Yeah,
Just speak.
Raining is hard. Everything's too hard. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming in and for being a part of it. Thank you so much. If we didn't get to your questions, ask us on one of the mediums that we've already said. It's good to talk about these things. So yeah, I'm going to end the stream here because we need to go and lie down in a dark room for some time. Definitely. But thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back. So
thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thanks for being so welcoming. Bye.